Hi everyone. As the title of this video would suggest, I was feeling really miserable and sad, and so I bought some books. I realise this is a very capitalist approach to sadness. I realise that these books won't directly give me happiness, but I do feel one step closer, and I did do more practical things like eat cake, so there is that. I haven't done a mid-month book haul in I think years, but you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. I will link all of them in the description box down below, and many people have been asking where I've been buying books during lockdown. There was a really helpful blog post detailing which bookshops were still operating during lockdown. Some of them were posting from their own stock, so out of their back room, and some of them were liaising directly and continued to liaise directly with wholesalers, so they were being the middleman, and therefore you had more choice, whatever the wholesaler happened to have in stock. A lot of the books I've been getting from Katie at Storytellers Inc. She is great. I will link her down below too, along with the blog post with everybody else. Basically, you just message her on Twitter and say, "Hi Katie, I would really like this book." And she goes, "Great, it's this much." And then you PayPal her that money and the book arrives on your doorstep. How excellent. So yeah, lots of links down below. Buy wherever you feel that you can. So let's talk about books. Shall we talk about books? The first book that I have to show you is a recommendation from Lauren over at Lauren and the Books. Though she hasn't actually read this yet, I'm not even sure if she owns this one, but she was talking about the second book in the series, which she had accidentally bought thinking it was the first, and I thought it sounded really great. So I bought number one. This is Bluebird, Bluebird by Attica Locke, and it's the first in a crime series, and as you know, I have been looking to try and find a new crime series to fall in love with. So this is about Darren Matthews, who is a black Texas Ranger working the backwoods town of Highway 59, and he is called to the murder of two people, first a black lawyer from Chicago, and then 3 days later a local white woman. He must solve the crimes and save himself in the process before Locke's ever-widening racial fault lines tear the community apart. I bought some poetry collections. The first one is published by Liverpool University Press, who publish some fab people. They are how I discovered Sarah Westcott through her collection Slant Light, which I also really recommend. This one is called How to Wash a Heart by Barna Campbell, which is their first full-length collection to be published in the UK. If you have read my short story collection, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night, specifically the first story, Animals, then you will see why I was drawn to a title such as this. This is one long poem, or else each page doesn't have its own title. They're fragments that come together to form a whole. It's about diaspora, it's about the repercussions of colonialism, it's about immigration, it is about being made to feel foreign in the body of a country, and feeling as though you've been transplanted and then rejected. And the sample poems that I read before buying this were stunning. They blew me away. So I'll link some of those in the description box down below too. My favourite poetry prize ever is the Forward Prize, and I was a judge for that a few years ago. Had been following it for years before that, continue to follow it now. There are 3 prizes, one for best individual poem published in a journal, one for best debut, and one for best collection that's not a debut. There's also an anthology that they bring out every year. Last week they announced their 2020 shortlists, and I was very keen bean waiting for them to announce those so that I could track down some of the collections I didn't already have, the ones that spoke to me the most. So, so far 2 of those have arrived. The first one is Shine Darling by Ella Frears. This is about storytelling and intimacy and the dangers of those things. One of the sample poems I read that really sang to me was called Moon Myth, and the beginning is this. Because we donated our jewellery for the tabernacle, by we I mean women, and by women I mean allegories, we have been assigned the moon. Not a moon, our small argumentative moon, sea of crisis and all the old heave-ho stone dragging waves over pebbles since the dawn of time. 58% of women say, take what you're given, lest they assign us an even smaller celestial body. Everyone knows the fallopian tube is a moon shoot. The second collection to arrive is Rendang by Will Harris. Will was one of the poets that we shortlisted for Best Individual Poem when I was a judge, so I'm excited to read a full-length collection by them. The blurb says, this book alights on Indonesian artifacts, gentrification and citizenry. It's an urgent comment on what it means to be a person now, a dissection of and love letter to the histories, places and things that made us. I also bought this poetry book, which is huge. It is going to be definitely the biggest poetry book on my poetry bookcase. I'm here for it. A couple of weeks ago, I made a video talking about 20 of my favourite books by Black poets. I will link that in the description box down below. And someone commented saying you should check out the work of Lucille Clifton. And I have read her poetry before, but I don't own any of her books. I think I must have read her work in anthologies with other people. And I thought, I need to rectify that. So I've rectified it. Big time. Also, this collected works has a foreword by Toni Morrison, which just makes it even better. In May and the beginning of June, I created a Pride and Prejudice audiobook. It took 5 weeks of reading every day on Instagram Live, and then I created a 5-part video series where you can listen/watch all of the audiobook. So I'll link that in the description box down below. It reminded me that I haven't read 3 of Jane Austen's other books. So I decided to buy those, and Penguin were doing 3 of their Clothbound Classics, I think for £33 on their Penguin shop. I don't know if they're still doing that. I'll link it down below. But I decided to buy the Clothbound Classics to go with the Pride and Prejudice one that I have. They are illustrated on the covers by Coralie Bickford-Smith, and they are beautiful. So I bought Persuasion, and I bought Sense and Sensibility, and I also bought Emma. I have seen the most recent adaptation of Emma. I haven't seen any of the adaptations of the other ones because I've always said to myself, I want to read the book first, and then just haven't. So I will read the books and then I can watch the adaptations, or whichever way round I feel like doing it. But yeah, I bought these. This next book I saw on Holly Exley's channel, and I love her. I will link her in the description box down below. When she was talking about it, I realized I really need this in my life, and I think that lots of us could probably benefit from this book. And it's called How to Do Nothing: Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. This is probably particularly relevant if you create content online, but also if you, well, anybody, but I would say probably specifically freelance people, or maybe I'm just saying that because that is my own experience of freelance life. But I have spoken before about using productivity and organization as a means to feeling like you're in control of the things that you can't control. And that may be for any number of reasons. For me, it's probably linked with hospital trauma and not being able to control my own health. And that can be a coping mechanism that can be healthy, and sometimes it can be really unhealthy. In this, she's talking about how society feeds into that in a wider way, not in just that very specific kind of way, but talking about how we feel pressure to be performative in every aspect of our lives, particularly online, and how that is exhausting, and how if we actually took a step back and questioned why we were doing these things, we will be able to achieve more, not just on a personal level, but on a political level. Let me read you a little bit of the blurb. It says, "Nothing is harder to do these days than doing nothing. But in a world where our value is determined by our 24/7 data productivity, nothing may be the most important form of resistance." So argues the artist and critic Jenny Odell, who sees our attention as the most precious and overdrawn resource we have. Once we can start paying a new kind of attention, she writes, we can undertake bolder forms of political action, reimagine our role in the environment, and arrive at a more meaningful understanding of happiness and progress. So, yeah. This next book is a recommendation from Bernardine Evaristo, who has been singing its praises both on Twitter and on the back of the book as well. This is a non-fiction title called Forced Out by Kevin Maxwell. Kevin was a police officer in the UK for 10 years. This book is about that. He joined just after 9/11, and this is him talking about those 10 years as a gay black man in the police force in the UK, and how he was ultimately forced out due to racism and homophobia. Bernardine said, "I was shocked and saddened at the systemic discrimination and corruption directed at him by his colleagues and superiors, and how they closed ranks to cover their tracks." I think this is going to be a very illuminating book. Another non-fiction book that I've bought is Notes Made While Falling by Jen Ashworth. I've never read her non-fiction before, but I've read her fiction. But this, as you may be able to tell by the cover, is about health and body, and you know that I'm always drawn to books about those things. It says, Notes Made While Falling. Let's try that again. Notes Made While Falling is both a genre-bending memoir and a cultural study of traumatized and sickened selves in fiction and film. It offers a fresh, visceral, and idiosyncratic perspective on creativity, spirituality, illness, and the limits of fiction itself. At its heart is a story of a disastrously traumatic childbirth, its long aftermath, and the out-of-time roots both of trauma and creativity in an extraordinary childhood. So there's that one. I also bought this short story collection, which I've heard great things about, which is called How to Love a Jamaican by Alexia Arthurs. The blurb says that the things at the heart of this collection are cruelty, loyalty, betrayal, ambition, and regret. This book is about Jamaican immigrants and their families back home. Some stories are asking huge questions about what defines a person. Other stories explode small moments, I love that phrase, of deep significance and lasting effect. Next is a book that I haven't bought, but is a proof that I've been sent from Granta that sounds fascinating. This is coming out in September, and it's called Between Light and Storm, How We Live with Other Species by Esther Wolfson. It sounds like it's trying to do so much. It says, beginning with our shared origins on Earth and the interaction between our prehistoric ancestors and other creatures, Wolfson traces the millennia-long evolution of conceptions of the soul and conscience in relation to the animal kingdom and the consequences of our belief in human superiority. She explores our representation of animals in art, our consumption of them for food, our experiments on them for science, and our willingness to slaughter them for sport, fashion, and decoration, as well as examining concepts of love and ownership. For decades, Esther Wolfson has lived with birds, observing them closely and getting to know their always individual ways. So I'm hoping she's going to be talking about her specific relationship with birds, part memoir, and then also zooming out and looking at this huge thing, the history of our relationship with animals in art and literature and the world in general. That just sounds absolutely fascinating. And then also finally, I was sent the latest edition of Poetry London because I'm subscribed to them. I'm subscribed to 3 poetry journals: Poetry, in all capital letters, Poetry London, and also The Rialto. They are my favourites. This edition of Poetry London has Raymond Antrobus on the front. Always a joy. I will link them in the description box down below. I'll also link my poetry playlist where I recommend lots of literary journals and books that you can go and check out. So that was my sadness book haul. Yeah, I've also bought more books than this, but they haven't arrived yet, and I will save them for next month's book haul. I'm reading quite a lot at the moment, so I look forward to talking to you about not only these books, but other books that I have been reading. I'm also finally getting all of the books, I say all of them, it's a third of my books have been not even in storage, that implies that they're not here, but they have been in cupboards, in bags, because I hadn't been able to buy a new bookcase, which I have finally been able to do. So I'm going to film a video that will be me reorganizing my books, rediscovering books I haven't seen in 6 months and talking to you about those as well. But yeah, I hope you're having a good start to the week. I hope you're as well as you possibly can be, and I'm sending lots of love to you all.